we're back, and hopefully this is better.
Great. I'm
Hi,
sure
guys.
people let us know. Good. We're about to talk to Joost because what we do and what Kelly as the producer does is she works out what the different elements are to finally get to alpha. The alpha is the point at which you can play through the full game. There might be lots of bugs, but everything is implemented. Beta, or as Americans say, beta. Beta is the point at which, in theory, you could publish the game. It wouldn't get very well reviewed, but you could just about get it out there. And generally there's about a month between alpha and beta, and then another month between beta and final master. So the alpha point is a very important one because all the elements need to come together. So that we need to have done all the animation, at least in a basic state. We need to have all the backgrounds created. We need to have coloured them. And creating the backgrounds is a really important point. Sorry, I've stolen your moment again.
Right.
I do beg your pardon, but I think this might be interesting. So the point at which a background is created is really important because that requires both that particularly requires the design to have defined exactly what happens. And once we know exactly down to the minutiae of what happens, then what we can do is define what that layout is. And once it's and then it'll go through the stages that we've already explained. It'll be a thumbnail, then it'll be a guide, then it'll be the final line. And at that point, that's great because that releases us, one, to colour it, two, to define the animation, and thirdly, it means that the implementers can really start implementing. So that's a really important point. So what we do is we come up with dependencies, and the dependencies are, until that layout is finished, we can't colour it, we can't define the animations, we can't start implementing in anger. So one of the bottlenecks that we identified was with the level of scripting and implementation, and it was at that point that we asked Joost, who's one of our wonderful long-term programmers, to really look into the tools to find out whether people like Robert could script faster if Joost could improve the level of tools that they use to do the scripting. Joost.
Yeah, basically what Charles said. I've been talking to the implementers and finding out what's slowing them down in developing the content for the game, and finding technical solutions for that. And there's an extra level to that because all the tools need to run on 3 different platforms because some of us use Windows, some of us use Macs, and some on Linux. So we
And which is the best?
let's see.
Well, as a scum VM man, it would have to be Linux, wouldn't it?
It's cross-platform, so it's not really partial to any particular platform, but
yeah, I'm afraid, and I'm afraid I fell for the Mac ads where they showed brown boxes for PCs and lovely white boxes for Mac, and I've been and Mac people are sort of more arty and so and more fun, yes. And so I turned from the dark to the light side about 5 years ago, which is a real nuisance. Sorry?
From the dark to the grey side.
Okay. Lovely. Sorry. So that's
yeah,
going
that's
well.
what I've been spending most of my time on last month, and should be for another few weeks, and then hopefully there'll be most of the bottlenecks sorted. But it'll be an ongoing process as they develop more content and run into new issues.
So what we've got to do, is, from the production perspective, is balance the work that someone like Joost does to produce the tools and how much time that'll save the implementers, because you could go on forever. And indeed, as time goes on, your tools become more and more refined. And one of the problems really was that the jump from Broken Swords, the previous Broken Swords to Broken Sword 5, was a massive one. So we did require a lot of new tool sets. But ultimately, the script is a lot more effective and should be more powerful.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Cool. Do you think that's
Okay,
answered the question?
Yeah, I think so. Then we have a question from Jenny, who asked who came up with the specific character traits of George and Nico and their names and how.
Ooh,
That's a good one.
that's a great question. We're going back to about 1994, which that's just the other day, really, wasn't it? 1994.
Yeah.
Seems like it was just the other day.
8 years old, bloke.
Yeah, and what happened is we'd just written a game called Beneath the Steel Sky, which I'm sure some of you will know. In fact, I know that some of you will know. And we met, Noreen and I met with Sean Brennan, who was then the Deputy Managing Director of Virgin, and they were really excited by the way that Beneath the Still Sky and Lower the Temperatures had been received. And Sean said, let's create something really, really ambitious now, with a really great production value. And he was really into anti-heroes. He loved the idea of creating an anti-hero, and that never really quite worked with us. He wanted something much more gritty and violent. And Revolution was very much founded on the principle that we didn't want to take ourselves too seriously. So both Noreen and I had worked at Activision a few years beforehand, and Sierra had really, in our opinion, begun to go off the rails, because their King's Quest games were about King Graham of Daventry. Now, if you're English, you know that Daventry is just off the M1, and it's by Luton Airport, and it's where Vauxhall make their cars. It's not where King Graham, and he wouldn't be called Graham anyway, and he wouldn't be of Daventry. And oh my God, they took themselves so seriously. So really, what we were doing is we were sort of responding. We were. I mean, LucasArts had only just released Maniac Mansion, which I was sort of off my radar. So that's our background was very much about creating games that had a serious story, but were actually really, really fun. So when Sean wanted this sort of gritty anti-hero, I knew a little bit about the Knights Templar, but not an awful lot, I have to say, and started researching them, went over to Paris, and it was just absolutely wonderful. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create characters that were fun. The reason that you generally have two characters is that it's a great way to convey the story. If you have one character, then the story goes inside their head, and you have less opportunity. Whereas it's the same on television. We have two cops. They sit next to each other, they discuss what's going on, and in doing so they convey the story. But what we really wanted was we want two characters that would create an interesting dynamic, an interesting sexual tension. And so came up with George as an American, quite laid back, and Nico as a really driven French woman. And generally I think the tension did work, and the interaction between the two did work well. But that's why we came up with those characters. Who came up with the name? I know that we had some really crazy names for George before he got called George.
What?
like Buck at one point, I think. I'm not sure. I mean, dreadful. I mean, thank goodness. I mean, only for a millisecond. And we sat and we came up with loads of names. In those days, of course, Dave Cummins was writing the script, and a great writer he was too. And he takes an awful lot of credit for the humour that went in, and for George and Nico. And indeed, he may have even called them that. I don't quite remember, but that's where George and Nico came from, and it allowed us to play with dynamic. And quite a few people have said, when are they going to get it together? And my reply to their disappointment was, well, wouldn't that sort of ruin everything? But anyway, that's a great question, and that's the best answer I can give.
I've got one from Roger. He's saying, could I ask Charles, in view of the predicted end of the world on the 21st, which is only 2 days away, is there any chance of a working demo for tomorrow, so that it can end on a high?
Well, we did think that we ought to get and many apologies that the first monthly update, Developer's Diary, was later than it should have been, but we were determined to get it out before the end of the world. The funny thing about Broken Sword 2, of course, is that we released it in 1997, so we were working on it for a year or so, probably from the end of 1995. Thank you.
Yay, Tim!
From the end of 1995. Do I look fat in this?
Everybody's very happy.
And it seemed like such a long way away. It seemed so exotic that the world was going to end in 1995, 2005, so about 15 years. It seemed like such a long way away, and we could get excited about it. Now it seems so strange to think that it's actually in 2 days' time.
Yeah.
On balance, I don't think the world is really going to end. But And so, in answer, thank you for that question. I think we're probably going to find it very difficult to create a demo within the next couple of days, unless Rob works all night and all day. And even then, I think it might. And Joost finishes off his tool.
Thanks for that. Let's see. I'm not sure if we partly answered this one, but would you ever consider a director's cut of Broken Sword 3 and 4?
Yeah, Broken Sword 3 would be great. And somebody else in one of their questions says, but no boxes, please. And Broken Sword 3 I was very fond of. The ending, as I said at the beginning, was rushed because we really ran out of time, budget and everything else. But I would like to rework that because I think there's a lot that we could do with it. I think if we were to do it, it would be full 3D, and we'd keep it 3D, but we would change the camera so that that became more user-friendly. Also adjust the box puzzles. Somebody else asked one of their questions about how to about the timing and how you time a scene. And Broken Sword 3 is an example of a cock-up, because what we have is we have the excitement, we have the tension building, we expect the pace to go up, the pace does go up, and then you come across another blooming box puzzle. Now, clearly, as the designer and the director, I have to take full responsibility. I put the box puzzles in for the aeroplane, which I still maintain is a great box puzzle, and I also then put it in. And the other designers, bless them, and it was my fault. I should have stopped it. But they then took it and they iterated and they created more variations of the box puzzles. So I would still argue, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree, that at its core, the box puzzle actually worked really well with the aeroplane and with pushing it off the pressure pad to open the door and then pushing it across, and etc., etc., etc. But it got a little bit out of hand. I've forgotten what the question was.
This was about BS 3.
Oh, doing the director's cut. Yeah. Okay, so what would then happen is we would certainly have the opportunity to rework and would want to rework a number of the puzzles. We'd want to rework the box puzzles, and also somebody said, could we have a more satisfying ending for Broken Sword 3? Wouldn't it be great to work out what we actually wanted to convey, and then to be able to do that, and even to adjust the ending to make it more satisfactory? Because the dynamic of Anna Marie and Nico and George, I think, works really well. But it does all feel very rushed, and apologies for people. I mean, a lot of people love the game. A lot of people love both Broken Sword 3 and 4, but generally I do think that we did rather rush the end, and apologies for people who were a little bit disappointed when they got there.
For the director's cut, will we make it point and click, or will it still be with keyboard controls?
It will be point and click.
There you go. I can't remember who asked that one. Hannock, I think. On to the next question. This is a pretty interesting one.
I hope it involves some art.
Oh, do you want something with art?
Oh no, also interesting one, and then Tim and Tori can come and talk about that.
Yeah. So, how do you go about pacing the sections between the two main characters, George and Nico? And do you plan around the number of puzzles for each? Estimated playtime, story?
That's a really good question. And when I was talking about the pacing of the boxes for Broken Sword 3, I was sort of answering that question. I'm going to, like a politician, I'm going to answer a slightly different question. And if you read a script, a film script or a television script, it is a certain format. You know that each page is going to take a minute. You can read it in about an hour, and you really know exactly what you're going to get. How they make bad films in Hollywood, I don't quite understand, because you should be able to read a script and see what's good and what's bad. And if you had somebody very experienced, then it should be easy for them. A game is very, very different, because we have no way of describing in quite the same way how interactivity works. It's much more instinct and gut feel. So what I'll do with the designers and the scripters is actually just get a gut feel for how that works. On the basis that when you reach a point, one of the key nodes, you want the pacing to rise. In a film, of course, you have the 3-act structure, and you talk about reaching a climactic point for the end of scene 1 coming down, climactic point for scene 2 coming down, and then the most the climactic of all those points is at the end when you have the final. Of course, the 3-act structure isn't relevant to a game, not least because the game is much longer. But what we do have is lots of these mini scenes, which is where all the ideas that we've got come into one node, and the plot has a major advance. And what I think we will, what I think works is to allow the player the freedom to explore. So in these first 2 screens that we've been talking about, there's a lot to do, there's a lot to explore, there are lots of different elements that ultimately will come together to allow you to progress. But then as you reach one of those climactic points where the plot is going to advance, then you expect the pace to go quicker. We don't want to put box puzzles or puzzles that are going to take a long time in your way. You reach the plot advance, and then you're into a new era of calm where you can go and explore. So beyond it is just a gut feel, and then of course when you play the game, when you test the game, then you can really feel, and we have plenty of opportunity to adjust it, because if we feel the game is going too slowly and the puzzles are too hard, then you can put inner monologues in, and inner monologues are wonderful. Other people don't have inner monologues. For us, it's a really great way to be able to balance the way that the game is playing, and balance the difficulty, and balance the speed at which the player is progressing.
That's great. So are we going to swap round now?
Yeah. Tori is sitting like a Cheshire cat, and she's got a bar humbug hat on.
I've been very Christmassy. I went out and bought a jumper special for the event,
Oh.
and tights too.
Wow, don't they look great?
And Tim, did you want to join us?
Yeah, nice to meet
Tim is also wearing. I mean, I haven't actually said anything to Tim.
Yeah, nice.
Dressed in for the occasion.
Nice Christmas jumper.
Bob and Gangster say hi to you, Tori.
Hi,
Yeah.
Bob and
Gangster says hi to Tim.
Yeah.
Right.
Who gave you your jersey?
Oh, she did. I traded it for a hat, so it's either a hat or a Christmas jumper.
That's very nice, very festive.
Right, cool.
It has a hood, so it's still keeping his youth.
Jules
Yeah.
is loving the jumper.
Cool. You got the hoodie.
Yeah, I'm still onto the.
Do you know what?
That's
Do you know what?
hat.
You look like the guy. What's the guy out of Assassin's Creed? You could be the guy out of Assassin's Creed, don't you think?
Yeah, good.
Oh wow! You should see Tim when he goes home. He swings across, and it's amazing because every single ledge is exactly the right height for you to be able to pull. I was wondering, and what he does is he jumps down the stairwell here, which goes all the way down 4 steps, and lands in a ball of hay.
Yeah,
Try and do that now.
That's just to get home. Yeah, easy peasy.
Do you
Anyway,
have a horse as well that instantly appears out of thin
I
air?
don't know Got the
See,
horse.
it's the Disney prince, really.
he is.
He's stallion.
I don't know if you guys remember, but of course Tori and Tim are both on our art team. So if you have any questions about art, please send them through, and I'll add them to the list. But before we get on to that, some people wanted to know, Charles, what happened to Brother Mark.
Brother Mark. Brother Mark showed everybody thought that he was rather effeminate, and he turned out to be a superhero.
Does that make any sense at all?
Well, he was rather effeminate, and turned out when the challenge arose, his moment of calling came, both to God and to him to be a hero. He took it. I'm not quite sure what happened after that.
Well, according to people, he is dead. Is he dead? I don't know.
Wait for the director's cut, then you'll find out.
Okay, here's another good one. Will there be machine puzzles like in the pyramid in Venus 2?
Oh, very much so, yes. And it's all inspired, of course, from the very first Indiana Jones. Do you know what? Can I change the subject again?
Yes.
Wonderful fellow, who I met, who was a beautiful singing at the York Minster, on Saturday, fabulous voice, who came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I really enjoyed Adventure Beat Inca Curse," which is amazing. That was the very first game I wrote. He looked much too young, I have to say. And then he was one of our backers. It was fantastic. It's lovely to meet backers. So Inca Curse was very much inspired by Indiana Jones. Raiders of the Lost Ark, which in my opinion was the best. It'd be interesting. 4. 4. Why was 4 quite so pants?
Is that the
I
one with
think
the aliens?
yes,
Or
it didn't work at all, did it?
Gosh.
But the first one was sheer genius. I would say still the best adventure movie ever produced, and a lot of the inspiration still comes from Indiana Jones and that moment where you pick up the gold statue, he puts the bag of sand on, he thinks it's perfect, and obviously the weights aren't quite right and the ball comes down. I mean, it's just great. So a lot of our ideas were very much inspired by that. So the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay, here's another one from the list. This is about a Kickstarter reward which I had forgotten about. It was the director's commentary option, which we promised to include in the game as a result of our stretch goal at 800,000. Thanks for the reminder, because it is going in, of course. But the questions are about that is, will it feature comments just from you, Charles, or will it be other people on the team as well?
Very good question, Tim.
I don't mind speaking on it.
I think what I imagine doing is, I think it would be nice to be the whole team. I would imagine, although it hasn't been decided, that what we'll do is we'll actually, in fact, Joost, we could probably ask you about this, the feasibility of actually recording all the point and click or slide and tack movements, so that we play through the game and talk, and then we do an audio track on top of that. Give director's notes and team notes. I'm not sure how else we could do it, but that would probably be quite a good way of, maybe even speed stuff up if possible, so that people, instead of playing for the full 8 hours, which would be very lengthy, or maybe edit it. I don't know, but I would imagine it'll be the full team, and we'll come up with some clever way of actually making it an hour rather than the full game time, which is going to be considerably more.
Great.
16 hours, I think, is what it probably won't be 60. I don't know, 12, 13 hours.
We're seeing some funny comments, sorry, about Ghost Yoast and all sorts of things. Will we include the team in the game as an Easter egg?
It's a great idea.
I think there's lots of little Easter eggs to look out for.
Yeah.
Watch this space.
We won't be including the team. At one point we were going to include members of the team as characters, but there's really no reason at all why we shouldn't green screen people like we did for the Kickstarter video, and include them. So yes, that would be fun, wouldn't it?
Gangster suggesting that we put it as a painting in the art gallery.
Just a group shot of everyone going, hee.
Well, I'm just thinking, how long have we been working
could be
on
Greek
the art
gold.
gallery?
I can assure you the art gallery won't change. But this secret, and we're not allowed to talk about it yet, are you? Are we? The secret digital reward.
No.
We've got some nice. Yeah, no, we're going to have to. We're not allowed to talk about that. But we are planning to include some sort of backer feedback onto that, aren't we? So anyway, we'll talk about that later this week.
We will.
Yeah.
Before the end of the world.
Yeah, definitely. We need to get it out before the end.
You're
of the
right,
world.
but that's 11:11. That's 11 minutes past 11 on Friday. So can we try and get it out tomorrow?
We can try.
Okay.
What happened to Virgil from Broken Sword 4?
Virgil was cool, wasn't he? Well, in the director's cut, you're going to find out all about Virgil and what he did later.
When are we doing this director's cut, Charles?
That's not one of the questions, is it?
No.
Oh, good.
Where did Petra know Nico from in the third game? Is that for the director's cut as well?
No, that's a really, really good question. What we talk about is that Petra worked for the Grand Master, and Nico encountered the Grand Master at the end of the first game. So I thought we'd explain this, and if we haven't, then apologies. But the idea was that I think she nursed the Grand Master back to health when the church blew up, and so she would have known Nico, because Nico obviously blew the church up with George. So that was our connection. I was able to answer one.
Sorry, I had a question in a notepad somewhere, but that I lost. I do remember it off the top of my head. It's that's right. Nico's, you know, the bit in with Nico, the new bit in Director's Cut of Broken Sword 1. Was that always intended to be in the game, or so was that originally cut out? Or
Which bit
how
with
did
Nico?
it come about? You know, the first. I think it's the first bit, isn't it? That's new with Nico.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she has any other bits that I knew, but I thought it was just the first.
No, she was always she was always going to be in there in the gallery at the beginning, because obviously what we want to do is we want to tell.
Oh no, sorry, this is Broken Sword 1, BS1 Director's Cut.
Oh, sorry.
You know, we inserted.
Yes, all that new Nico
new
stuff. Yes,
stuff with
yes,
Nico.
yes.
Was that always meant to be in the game?
That was our backstory, which we had intended to include, but pretty quickly it would have been insanely long. I mean, the game as it was took about 2 years, and that would have added another at least 6 months. So there was a point at which we had to cut it off. So I felt that it didn't adequately explain what there were, to me, lots of elements that hadn't been adequately explained, and we tried to do that through the director's cut, the additional material of the director's cut, and also what we wrote in the diary, so that if there was anything that was unclear, then we tried to explain it in the diary. So hopefully, because we really went through this with a fine-tooth comb, hopefully everything makes sense.
Is there any chance we'll get to know more about George's past or family or anything more about him?
Do you know, the funny thing is that we have all of these, we've written so much about George's background, about his grandmother in Idaho, but then he comes from California, and we start losing track of exactly what he's done. And what's wonderful is that whoever, I mean, it's probably one of you guys, went and wrote it all up, characters on Wikipedia. You can go back and find out all about George and Nico and all the other characters. And it's really useful because it means that it becomes a reference. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the world, is that, you know, now it's other people that are giving us the reference back and will tell us if it's wrong. But yeah, absolutely. I think we've had a little bit of inconsistency, because I think at one point we said Idaho, and another at the beginning he said California. So what we'll do actually is we'll probably send it out, and if we've got any questions we'll ask, because I would imagine that between our backers we'll probably have a fantastically comprehensive wiki of everything that's happened in Broken Sword.
People seem to be really interested in this director's cut of Broken Sword 3 or 4. So here's another one for you. Would we need permission for Broken Sword 4 from Sumo to do a director's cut for it?
Oh, what a good question. We wrote it in partnership with Sumo, and if we did a director's cut, then we have a commercial relationship with Sumo where they share some of the profits. It was all anticipated, so we wouldn't need their permission. We probably would work with them in some capacity if it made sense. When we wrote Broken Sword 4, Revolution, we had no team at all. We'd had to cut right back when one of our projects was cancelled, and you know, I've talked at great length on many occasions about how difficult it was, how impossible it was as an independent developer, 10 years ago. Because ultimately the retailers took half of any money that they took, and the publishers then took 80% of what was left, and then paid 3-4% to the format holder. So we were getting a tiny chunk of the pie, against which was set all the development costs, all the localization, all the quality control, etc., and anything else they could think of. So it became impossible to make any profits. So I haven't really answered the question at all, have I?
Great politician.
Yes, I'm a great politician. That then gets me back to the beginning of Broken Sword 4, where we actually had nothing and very little to do, and Sumo were great to work with, and then really took the burden of the project, and I worked very closely with them. That was then. Now as you can see, we've built the team back up again, and we've got a great team, so we would certainly do an awful lot more, but we would still work with Sumo if they wanted to, because they were a great partner. There you go. I answered in the end, didn't I?
Yay! So where is the backer forum at?
That's a very good question, and we did want to rope Peter in, who is writing it, and funnily enough, just before we went live, he slipped down the stairs, never to be seen. We are going to do our very best to have the Backer forum go live on Friday.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've done all the graphics.